This week's podcast is brought to you by Lavoie's Repair. Lavoie's Repair is your place for trusted name brand tires and service. Your neighbors at Lavoie's Repair offer everyday low prices and expert service on tires for trucks, cars, farm, and heavy equipment. Infield tire service is available as well. We keep you moving. Call Lavoie's Tire in Tracy at 507-629-3008 today.
Thanks for listening to the Headlight Hot Seat podcast. I'm Per, your host, so you have to put up with me for the next half hour or so. I'm going to start this in the name of disclosure and transparency to preface this podcast by letting everyone know I am not a farmer. I know enough to be dangerous. That is to say, I know enough to write a few egg stories every year. We plant in the spring, we harvest in the fall. I know that stuff. It's the in-between window that I just don't have much of a grasp on. So I rely on the experts, the farmers themselves, who to help me write my stories. And today we have a very young one in the studio by the name of Mr. Asa Nelson, one of our next generation farmers, you could say. Thanks for joining us, Asa.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So let's get to know Asa a little bit. Tell me about your past, born and raised, education, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so attended Tracy Area High School here, graduated in 2015, and parents Terry, Sue Nelson, and went to college at Wilmer Ridgewater College for farm operation management, and then transferred to SMSU in Marshall and got a general bachelor's degree in agriculture. As far as growing up, helped out my uncle and grandpa on the farm, started out rock picking, and then got to do other field work as I got older. Got to do a farm a share crop field as an FFA project. And so just lucky to have the opportunity to farm with my uncle now, and that's who we work together and raise corn, soybeans. Now today, my wife and I and kids have, like I said, raised corn, soybeans, and then she got me into sheep. And so that's her deal. I'm just kind of maintenance and accounting on that side of things. But
that's a family thing, right? With
yeah. So her family had sheep, and that goes back. Yep.
So I've always been curious. I'm a city boy, and I grew up and went to high school, and there was a lot of farm kids. That's what we used to call them back then, farm kids. Is that something that you're just born to do, or is it in your blood, or your father did it, your grandfather did it, his father did it? Am I on the right track?
Well, I think, there's no doubt about it. It helps if you're born into the right family. Whether I got the opportunity with my uncle, it's if your dad farms, that gives you a step up to do that, absolutely. But I think it's, if you can watch someone do it and enjoy it themselves, that gets instilled into you. Because there's all sorts of farm families that the kids don't come back, and maybe it's not because the dad didn't enjoy it and they just want to do their own things, or the mom didn't enjoy it. But I think if you see that and it's cultivated into you that this is a way of life, that this is something that our family does, and that it's that you have fun doing it, I think then that's kind of what makes it more attractive and what happens.
Is people talk about the decline of the family farm. Is that a real thing? Is that or is that hyperbole? Are we talking?
I think in general it's hyperbole. You look at, are the acres getting bigger on average? Yep. Are there less operators? You bet. But there's still, it takes people, and so like on our my uncle and I's farm, I lease all the equipment from him, so he's kind of the main guy. But I look at, who all helps out? Well, we have neighbors down a mile of the road. They come and help operate equipment. We've got other neighbors down on the lake shore that help out part-time. And so it's still, maybe it's not always the direct family members, but it's still a community thing, to put the crop in, take it out, and it still takes people to do it. And so...
So we still have neighbors. We just don't have as many of them, maybe.
Yeah, there's not, in the 50s, you have, there was a couple farms on every section, and so it's different. And absolutely, there's less people, but by and large, most, even if it's an incorporated farm, it's still a family farm, by and large. Are there exceptions to that rule? you bet. But I think in general, it's still a lot of families that do it.
So let's talk about your family a little bit. Your wife and children.
Yeah,
Child or children?
children. Yep. So
Children.
two. It so Morgan and I got married. Well, we started dating in high school, and so kind
High
of
school sweethearts.
high school sweethearts. It worked out, and so we like I said, we live over in south of Tracy there, kind of close to Garvin, and it's it's we enjoy it. We enjoy being outside. We enjoy farming. The kids love all things to do with the sheep and pasture and riding in tractors, and it's fun.
Who are your kids?
And so we got Drew and Hank,
Two boys.
two boys.
Are they aspiring to be farmers? Like when there's an athlete in the family, maybe the dad pushes the kid to play basketball.
Oh, yeah.
More than he maybe wants. Do you do that as a parent? Like, okay, these kids are going to grow up to fill my shoes.
Of course, you go, well, I'd want them to do their own thing, be their own thing. And but I mean, more than anything, as a parent, for me, it's you look at there's different charts and studies and say you only get to spend so much time with your kids, and this as they're young, as there's a lot, and then the older they get, the less time. Well, selfishly, how do you get to spend more time with your kids then? Well, make them stick around and make them want to, so that absolutely, I'm not forcing or pushing. And at 3 years old, of course, we're not doing child labor, but I mean, what do what do they get excited about right now? Oh, tractors and sheep and playing with toys. And the 3-year-old says he wants to farm and, play with the toys. And so it doesn't take, and there's a lot, I think that's not just farm kids, but that's a thing as a child as well, that's something that they enjoy. And so, yeah, I hope someday that they can continue to farm with us. And that's what, Morgan and I talked that, well, we want this to look like something that they would want to do.
Yeah.
We want what we're doing today. We don't want it to look like, pain and suffering and whatnot. So that's our goal is we just, we want it to be something that would be fun for them.
You're not going to talk to them anytime soon about the 80s farm crisis, are you?
No. We got to leave it. We got to leave it looking rosy for a while.
Well, it sounds like they're kind of carving their own path right now, but I'm sure you two are wonderful parents and let them do their own thing. Let's talk about your job and your duties.
Yeah, so I graduated from college in 2019, and since then, I've been working for CHS as a grain buyer. And so, office out of Tracy, Ruthven, work with local farmers on. It's a sales role, trying to buy their grain into our elevators. But in that, there's assistance in trying to market the grain at good prices and manage price risk or logistics, and so that's been good. CHS has been good to me. It's continuing education, and I get to bring that to the farm. So on my own farm, I get to use some of the skills that I've learned on marketing my grain better. And
when you talk about losing family farms and kids going away and not coming back, did you always aspire to come back, to return?
Yeah, so I was given the opportunity, and I always liked farming and whatnot. But my uncle brought it up to me in high school. He's the one that kind of said, "Well, what do you think about doing an FFA project and trying farming a field?" And so I mean, he opened that door for me, and so without that, I wouldn't have had it. And so that was awesome. And then him and I talked, and okay, and he really thought it was important that regardless if I wanted to farm someday, that I go to college.
Okay.
And so that first year of college at the Wilmer, we just say Wilmer Votech. He said, or the instructor asked, what is something that Asa should do before he comes back to the farm? And Todd goes, grain marketing. I think he should be, learn that skill better. And so I took that to heart and went to focused on that. Got an internship with CHS with that, and now, as Morgan and I work on building out the farm and have this job with CHS, I get to continue to refine my skills in grain marketing. So
I wonder if a lot of back in the day, I hate saying that because it's so cliche, but back in the 40s and 50s, I don't know, and I'm not saying this as an expert, but if farmers went to college, I think this is a new not a trend because it's been going on for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but farmers today, they go for a degree.
Yep.
And I don't know if that was the case way back in the golden days.
Yeah, it not necessarily, but the thing I've learned, whether it's from my uncle or my grandpa and watching other successful farms, is it's whether you go to accredited university or whether you go to some continuing education through the extension or just other programs out there. I think the key is just always continuing to learn. So whatever that is for you, whether it's the formal college or these other things that you can do, I think that's always been important. Is the continued education side of things.
So let's get into a little bit of technology. I'm going to read something here that I saw online. It wasn't even a farm website. It was actually a journalism website. It says, at the turn of the 20th century, the invention of the gasoline-powered tractor revolutionized farming. It said that one tractor could replace 20 horses, yet some farmers continue to use horses. Why not? They already had them. They were integrated into their workflow. I'm sure this is not me speaking, this is the author. I'm sure there were many discussions about how it was scary having those gas-powered things roaming around the farm, and many thought it was probably just a fad. The first tractors probably weren't perfect. They broke down, unlike the battle-tested horse. Yet those who persevered, exponentially more productive, profitable, and efficient with their resources. Remember, you had to feed the horses and take a valuable land to grow the horse fuel. Okay, that's pretty antiquated, as we know, but it's my segue into talking a little bit about technology. What are your thoughts? We know that machinery is getting bigger.
Yep.
Our cell phones are getting smaller and now bigger again, I guess. But the tractors, the equipment, the combines, everything is bigger these days. How has it changed for you and your family in general? Just being able to implement all this technology into your work.
Yeah. So of course, for me, I grew up with this, and then even in my post graduating college, some of the change has just been crazy in the technology that's developed. One of the things is I think it's made it easier to continue to farm. So I think whether it's auto steer and just fatigue and being able to not have to steer all day long, it's just created less operator fatigue, and so that you get people can continue to help out and farm later on. I think that's contributed to, so people say the average age of the farmer is getting older, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. Some of this technology has allowed that to happen. Whereas maybe back in the 40s, 50s, they just physically got wore out, and they just had to be done. And so I think some of that's okay. And that's something that we balance. And we look at on our farm is that, we don't want to get behind. We don't want to not to stay up to date. And it's got to make financial sense. You can't just go get a new gadget just because it's good. But I think, a lot of it just allows us to do a better job farming. I look at our combine, as we go up and down the hills, it changes settings automatically to clean the grain, adjust the cleaning equipment based on the angle of the hill. It's got we've got sprayers that shut on and off, and there's the technology out there that we can shut off 15 inches at a time or adjust the pressure depending on the wind. And so I think by and large it's allowing us to just be better at what we're doing. And
How did farmers do what they did before all this? I mean, it's just, and I think of the same thing in my industry. Back in the day when I started in journalism, we had to develop our own film. Go into the darkroom, roll the film, make sure it doesn't touch, put the right amount of chemical on it, all that stuff. Now it's a point and shoot with a digital camera. We can see if we got that shot. We go back to the office, we know what we got. And it's kind of the same but different in farming where, back in maybe when, let's say Chauncey Meade came when he started, and he still uses the old tractor. But he'll never get into one of these big ones. I know that, but he's pretty old school in that respect. But it's just I just think when I see these huge machines and they drive themselves, GPS, how did they do it back in the day? It's got to just impress you as a farmer who didn't have to.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll never work as hard or as my grandfather physically work as hard as my grandfather did. You know, the skills and that are needed today are different than the ones then. And so, you know, I look at, you know, kind of your analogy there. I just think the barrier to entry to some of this is, and maybe you see this for, you know, like you mentioned the whole point and shoot, the barrier to entry to some of this stuff, whether it's information access, whether it's the ability to do a good job, it's technology and the world of the internet has allowed everybody to have access to more things. So some of this stuff is getting, you know, smaller, more module. Yes, equipment's getting bigger, but there's things that maybe allow us to right size it for a farmer that doesn't have to necessarily have that scale. Or there's, you know, people have access to pricing inputs or other stuff that they didn't see that information in anymore. And so I think that's been good as a whole to open up and have less barriers that way. You know, some of the things that you and I have talked about previously was drones. You know, you look at kind of the
get there right after this. So let's go there right now.
well, that's an example of technology, and it's the cool thing is it's very modular right now, and you can get a drone to fit the size of your farm. So you don't have to be, let's say, a 10,000 acre farmer to make a drone work. You can buy a drone that fits the size of your operation. There's a lot of different sizes. Well, okay, what do you use that for? Well, we're monitoring the crop with it now. So on my farm, after planting and the corn started to grow, I had a drone fly it, and I was able to evaluate, you know, what kind of stand counts that I have out there. And you can do that on a four-wheeler, but the drone gives you the whole field quickly and maybe points you to the right direction to, you know, see, you know, look at those problem spots. I know of people in the area that had a drone fly their fields once a week or every other week, monitoring for weeds, diseases, nutrient deficiencies. It's crazy.
So is it making it? Let's compare the drone to the four-wheeler. Obviously, it's easier. Is that a right word, or more convenient, or?
I still think you got to ground truth it, but it gives you all of this technology, whether it's a drone or some of machinery information. We're drowning in data, and so we're just trying to decipher. It's good, but you got to be able to use it. And so taking some of those things to create actionable plans. You know, there's some farmers that they flew a drone before they sprayed for the weeds, and they're making a weed map or a pressure map for this next year. So they can maybe more acutely apply the herbicide and use less, or only use the higher rate where it's needed. And so there's just an infinite amount of possibilities with some of this drone AI stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you still got to have actionable data. And so that's why I think the biggest thing with a lot of this technology and things is that we have great data collection, but just, you know, how can we use it practically?
So now Asa Farm is my land out on Lake Mariah, and earlier this year I caught the drone flying over, and I got some pictures of it. I thought it was cool. And I hoped it was Asa and his guys, because I'm like, who's saving my fields here? I'm going to assume it's Asa, but you don't operate them yourself.
No.
Who does that, and how does that work?
So a farmer can, but you need to either have, if let's say you're going to, what was going on there was we were applying a fungicide onto the corn. And so that was to help prevent and cure some disease that we thought was there. And so in that case, it's a pesticide applicator's license what's required. So if I was doing it myself as a farmer, I could use the same private applicator's license. But then for flying the drone, there is you have to get a certain version of a pilot's license. I forget the exact, but there's some extra training involved, whether you do it commercially or just on your own farm. And so
the gentleman who does it, Bobby Bangesser?
Bobby Bangesser, yep.
Did you contact him, or how did you know?
So he farms with one of our neighbors over by where I live, and so knew he did it. He's a dealer in the area, so he sells drones to farmers, co-ops, other stuff like that. Then he does some application on his own, and so I had asked him if he wanted to do that, and he was able to put on the fungicide for me this summer.
Cool. So let's switch gears here. Let's talk yields, prices, input, all that stuff, all that fun stuff. That as a layman, I know nothing about. I hear prices are high or prices are low. Just put that in a nutshell for us. Asa.
Yeah.
What are we looking at this year?
Well, so it's hard to put a blanket. You'll probably upset somebody if I throw a number out there, but I'll throw a number out there. In this area, it feels like 235 bushel corn is going to be a pretty common occurrence. Somebody will tell me I'm sandbagging that number, and they had way better yields, and somebody will be like, well, I didn't get that. But by and large, we had a phenomenal growing season this year. It was, we had a dry start, so you're planting into good conditions. The soil was fit. I printed off, we have a software you can keep track of moisture and stuff like that. And it's just what you want to see. The moisture, we had, like I said, dry conditions to plant, and it just slowly accumulated that rain. I pulled it on one of your farms is what I pulled the data from. And the highest rainfall that we had was a 2-inch rainfall.
And that's ideal, right?
Yeah, so there wasn't huge runoffs, and absolutely right here in Tracy we had I think there was a 5 to 7 inch rain event, but as a whole we had good rains, timely. And when I look at the 30-year average rain on that farm is 19 inches, and we had 25 inches this year. So it's just, and that's what it takes to drive yield is number one thing is water, and so and we got that in Southwest Minnesota.
Do you use the phrase bumper crop? I know it's a cliche, it's a colloquialism.
Oh, it's absolutely a bumper of a crop.
Okay.
You drive the countryside, and it's we got corn everywhere, so it certainly is a bumper crop.
Such a thing as too much corn?
Oh man, we'll find out. If we can get it to where it needs to be, and without it going to spoil, then maybe not. If you look at the price, you could say, well, maybe we do have too much. We want to talk prices here. This year, and I just looked at, okay, what was Tracy Elevator today, or yesterday at the close for corn and beans, and $363 cash for corn and $10.20 cash for beans.
So put context onto that.
So a year ago, it was $395 cash on corn and $9.40 cash on beans. And so a little bit different, and that would maybe have to do with just, again, very, very, very good corn yields. Bean yields were good, but they're not the same top end that we're seeing on corn.
So I was talking to an extension expert the other day, earlier this week, and she used the phrase "too dry." I don't take this out of context. It was part of the conversation, but I always think you want it, the drier the better, because it's fewer heating costs, less heating costs. Is there such a thing as too dry beans?
So beans, oh yeah, everybody's preference is different, but for me, I think if you could combine them at 14% and deliver them, to the elevator, you'll get a little bit of dock, because the standard is 13%. Anything over that, and you'll get some sort of dock. Everybody does it a little bit different, or the different grain buyers in the area will do it different. But anything over 13%, you get dock. But if that's the standard and you get paid on 13% beans, if you combine 10% beans, well, your 10% moisture of water, well, you're missing out on selling 3% weight of water. And so right there alone, you're missing out on, because that's what we do as farmers, is we sell pounds of grain. Mm-hmm. And so, on soybeans, they allow us to sell 13% moisture, and corn 15%. So if you combine 10% beans, you're missing out on selling. Now, there's some other things that come with combining dry beans is you get a shatter loss at the front of the combine where we cut the beans. If it's too dry, it's brittle, and they'll snap and fall out, and you won't even be able to harvest them.
There's your too dry. Okay.
So there's your too dry. Between opportunity cost on selling it, and then just the harvestability goes down when you get below that 13%.
So the regular folks out there who don't know a lot about farming, we know, okay, it's spring we plant, in fall we harvest. We see the combines out there, but I'm curious, how close of an eye do you keep on the weather in January, February, or December? The snowfall amount, the temperature, because that kind of builds you into the spring, doesn't it?
To some degree. Some would say it's a great time to have a drought is in the winter, and just it's a minimal effect. Of course, now this is crop farmer hat on right here. You ask somebody with cattle out on the lot or something like that, they'd love it to be dry and fair weathered, and the snow accumulation helps, but I don't think it helps a ton. The rains that we receive in June, July, and August are going to be the most important thing for a bumper crop. And so I think if you asked everybody across the board, they'd be fine with pretty little snow.
I would be. Especially, my driveway out there.
Half a mile long driveway, it seems.
It's a headache. It's a mess. All right, let's get political. And I say that with a caveat because I hate talking politics, but I want you to talk about a little bit about tariffs. And I'm not an expert on this stuff, and maybe you're not either at this point, but tariffs have been in the news all year long with President Trump. How is that affecting you? And we can get into tariffs and a little bit about China and soybean exports as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess first thing I'll say is my opinion will be my opinion. And, not those that I farm with or even my wife or CHS, but let's just talk some facts here. Is number one, we've, since we got into a tariff war with China, there has been a reduced amount of soybeans purchased than normal. So if you look back over, what they have purchased historically, it's less. And so that's absolutely had an effect. You look at, where our local prices or what we say basis would be for, the Western United States was significantly lower at harvest. And so that had an effect on it that way. Did we, sell as much? And so there were some real world effects of, not just price, but logistics, space for beans, things that happened with the trade war. Now, as far as pricing opportunities and management that way, we knew it was coming. He campaigned on it. He told us that he was going to get into a trade war with China. And so we had opportunities to manage price risk, opportunities to, look at different things, advocate with, the associations we're involved when he was elected. And then it was still before he's president. And so, looking out, we had opportunities to price grain at higher levels than actually, in the last 3 days, the prices have rallied up to the highest prices in 3 months, and in part due to some tariffs, actually, or trade war agreements happening. But even prior to that, we had, the opportunities to price some grain. So I maybe have a more callous look at it of that, we were given the information was going to happen, and so do I agree with exactly how everything went about, how people conduct themselves, or how if it was necessary? There's all sorts of things that you could say, I think that could use some improvement. But for the good and bad, ultimately we're very dependent on China for purchasing our ag products. And so, some view of that and on a lot of other stuff to make the things that we consume in the United States. And I think this administration just said, we want to become less dependent. And that's maybe not a bad thing, but when you're dependent on, whether it's, things that we consume or things that we export on someone, any hiccup in that's going to cause some pain. And there was certainly some pain caused that way. Now, recently, this week, President Xi Jinping of China, they met. As of right now, what's being said, the headlines are that the U.S. is saying that China is going to buy 12 million metric tons between now and January, which is a typical time that they'll buy some beans. And then in the next 3 years, that they would buy at least 25 million metric tons. And that's probably just below average of what they've done in the last 5 years, that amounts. So maybe back up to some levels, and China's given some concessions on other things, and the U.S. has on other things. But and that's part of why the prices have rallied $1 since the beginning of October. Soybean prices have.
Right.
It's just on some of that rhetoric.
So here's a loaded question: Do you pay closer attention to the weather or politics?
Ooh.
Gotcha.
Well, in my job, it's probably politics, but it's so headline.
Right?
Exactly, it's what's affecting the grain markets, and so it's headlines, and I say access to information has been a positive, but it's also created a lot of volatility, and so it's not that I care about it, but I need to have an answer every day as to why did the market move, and our policies affect that, so.
Asa, you are off the hot seat. Thank you for joining me today.
This week's podcast was brought to you by Lavoie's Repair. Lavoie's Repair is your place for name brand tires and service. Your neighbors at Lavoie's Repair offer everyday low prices and expert service on tires for trucks, cars, farm, and heavy equipment. In-field tire service is available as well. We keep you moving. Call Lavoie's Tire in Tracy at 507-629-3008 today.